Melody. For my project this semester, I decided to dive into conservation. And I started out with the questions of what does conservation look like in my area specifically? My understanding has been very limited to an image of the Amazon or Africa, so what does it look like here? How does conservation need to change and develop with humanity? And what is our role as people who are not working in conservation? And I'll get to the frog later. So for my collaborator was Jared Heath. He's a wildlife biologist. Basically what he does for his work is he goes out into habitats and collects data on different species that are endangered. And he works for the government under the Ecosystems Biology branch of the USGS. So while I was talking with him, the government was shut down. He had a lot of free time, so I could pick his brain. But what I really appreciated about his background was how he came to this work. Usually I would imagine, people start out in education with this goal in mind of this career, but really what brought him to this is his love for nature and being out in nature. He would feel this deep connection in his soul and his being that he needed to be out there. So that led to him volunteering with the National Park Service. That led to an internship opportunity and now to a career that he did not plan for, but he's extremely passionate about it. So it was really exciting to talk with him about the topics covered in the realm of conservation. And one thing in particular that I loved hearing about is an example of what he's worked with, which is the mountain yellow-legged frog. And that's a local organism that different local organizations that I've been familiar with my whole life has been working to nurture. So I loved having that example of something happening literally in my backyard. So, going into the topic of conservation, as with any topic within, the changing environment, I kind of started out our connection with asking him, how do you not get depressed? Like, what drives you? Like, what keeps you going? And often when I would pose this question, we would always come back to that feeling that he couldn't always have the words to describe it, but it was this feeling of peace, of belonging, being out in nature, away from Los Angeles. He just felt this sacredness that he needed to protect. So that is something that has continuously driven him to do this work. And it also has brought him this faith that the environment, it's going to win. I think I mentioned this before, like this outlook of there is no competition between environment and mankind. It's one system. So these are some core beliefs that really he carries with him. Something else that he carries with him is he actually has a foundation. His knowledge base is really inspired by the Baha'i teachings, though he is not a Baha'i, because he has grown up around the Baha'i teachings, and he brought up this book, The Eternal Quest for God, which talks about, scientific endeavor and discovering a source and, does God exist? Can it be proved? And I asked if he could bring up something that particularly inspires him in his work. And he selected this section about the world of nature and the world of reason and how animals are from nature and man is from reason. But we discussed how even though there's this separateness doesn't discount the oneness, and it actually shows that, mankind coming from the world of reason, it means that they have a responsibility to protect the world of nature. So this really drives his work as well. Something that he really resonated with from the course material was the Mystery Teachings document and the Law of Wholeness. Sorry, I have to move you guys. You were blocking. Yeah, this topic of the oneness of an ecosystem and every part making up a whole, he sees this on a daily basis. You know, he sees the intricacies of ecology and ecosystems, and talking with him about this really helped me understand this vision of humans being a part of every ecosystem in a way that helps the ecosystem thrive. The narrative that I've always heard and seen is that humans being a part of any ecosystem is harming it, which of course is not true because we're from it. But, you know, this really helped me have a more positive outlook on humanity's involvement in the natural world. And so this source was the basis of that conversation. So on the topic of ecology, my question of what can we do, like what needs to happen to help people care, we talked a lot about education. And you know, he said repeatedly, like, he really wishes that people had a basic knowledge of ecology and about the way the natural world works. Because when you're in a classroom, which is how I learned, you know, you're looking at charts and diagrams and videos, it's missing that heart connection, is what he was saying. You know, to actually be out in the forest and to feel the air, see the creatures interacting with each other, seeing the connection and the oneness in action and feeling it, that's how you learn to care. Otherwise, it's just this theory that sounds right, but you know, you go home after school and you're in a world created separately from the natural world. So we talked a lot about the need for education to be in the woods, in the forest. You know, when you see the frogs disappearing, you care. You're definitely going to care. One of the videos that we watched this semester really had a big impact on me, and I wanted to share it with him. And it was the video about the Aboriginal community in Australia talking about the dolphins being their ancestors and the kelp dancing and these beautiful images. And I wondered what he thought, because his job, you know, what he does is so analytical and very systematic and scientific. And he was saying that, you know, you can't, the way the conservation world needs to move forward is in a spiritual sense, because it is so, his job is so heavy in the material sense that, you know, he's sure his colleagues could watch this video and maybe think, oh yeah, that's nice, but not really see any truth in it. But the truth is in feeling as well. So we talked a lot about the need to marry the material and the spiritual and try to imagine what this is going to look like going forward. And rooting the conversation in Indigenous wisdom was very helpful for them.
Melody, I just dropped in.
Okay, thank you. So continuing that topic, he expressed that the changes needed in conservation and in science really, you know, connects back to the framework we've talked about this whole semester, and the lens in which we're seeing the natural world and seeing conservation work. You know, Jared, as a Black man in the science world, he feels the disconnect. He feels that this lens, that a lot of the action being taken is from a Western white perspective, which is, of course, missing so much truth and vibrancy and progress. And so he talked a lot about, you know, needing a new scientific method, like needing something that isn't just based on things you can see and feel, but needing to marry the spiritual feeling that he feels in his heart when he's out in the field tracking the disease of a species. You know, we talked a lot about that inevitably that is where the science world is going as humanity's consciousness is shifting. And then to end very briefly with my own personal reflections, I think our conversations and diving into conservation really, I think it validated my work with educating young people. And it's led me to see how, even in an urban environment, I'm trying to figure out what I can do, whether that is creating an oasis in my garden with the community, some way to have that connection to nature. That's something that I'm eager to learn about. And one regret is I wish I had talked to Jared more about Hazel Johnson, because I really feel like he would have really resonated with her journey. So I think I will share that with him, actually, since I still know him. So yeah, thank you. So just briefly, some details about the frog. There's a Northern California species and a Southern California, and the Southern California one has been endangered for quite some time. And the biggest reason is the chytrid fungus, which it's just honestly decimating amphibian and reptile populations across the world, and people don't really know where it came from. So it was really fascinating to learn about, you know, Jared would go out and track a habitat, count the amount of frogs, come back the next year, and they're all gone. And it's because of this fungus. And so it's a really big thing that the conservation world is thinking about and trying to remedy. And so the in Long Beach, where I live, it was really cool to hear that the Aquarium of the Pacific, which I've gone to since I was a child, and the Los Angeles Zoo have both for years been raising tadpoles and little froglets to then be released in these habitats in Southern California as part of that conservation work. So yeah, it's just amazing that these things have been happening around me and you just don't really hear about it. And I'm sure it's a result of immoderation in some realm. We talked a lot about moderation and imbalance and how these things just appear because of it as a result.
Really enjoyed hearing about the conversations, and like you shared a great deal about like his reflections and your reflections. Especially I really appreciated like you let us know like what resource you all were exploring together. Because we all read those resources too. So I could lean in, right? Because I knew what resource it was. So that was really helpful. I was curious if in any of the resources, so like for example, I'm looking at my notes right now, there were a lot of moments where like, for example, this idea that the environment is not in competition with us is such a great framing, right? Because it's how it's framed right now. How it's currently framed is like, it's mother nature is pushing back, right? With like this idea that she's fed up with us and she's pushing back, right? So that means that we're like, it's an antagonistic relationship, right? But the way that it seems that he's framing it is that it's not, right? And so what I was curious about is that I saw like the resources, but were you able like to talk at the level of concepts or principles? So like, for example, the law of wholeness is not a principle, right? It's a resource. But the principle it leans towards is that interconnectivity, right? That you were speaking to, right? When you said the idea that the environment and nature is not in competition with us, right? So I was curious if like in your conversations, were you able to like move to the level of principle or at concepts at least? And it's okay if not. I'm just curious because it was really greatly like laid out with the resources, which helped us.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of our conversations, it felt very improvisational. Like I would come with questions, but then I would kind of just see where he would go. And
Yeah.
we talked a lot about the concepts of reciprocity and how I wasn't able to share more about it, but we talked a lot about the spiritual qualities that show up in the natural world. And he was sharing how he has a desire. He's also an artist, and he has a desire to, he doesn't know with what medium, but to show how the material aspects of the environment have a mirror relationship of the soul. So he would ask questions like, what is an invasive species of the soul? Or what does a drought of the soul look like? And so I think, yeah, in that way, I feel like he was exploring that oneness of like the soul and the physical environment. And we touched on the generosity, you know, of nature and how this scarcity mindset is created. You know, nature takes care of us, but scarcity, there's people who benefit from believing in scarcity, because then there's fear and then people can prey on the fear. And so, yeah, we covered a lot. It was really hard to like narrow in on on different concepts, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's very helpful.
Thank you.